My name is Will, and I, like Mulder from the X-Files, want to believe. So I've embarked on a journey of discovery. I've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical worlds. I've thrown myself into weird and wonderful experiences. I've even joined a coven of witches, all in the interest of finding something, anything, that will prove that there's something beyond this physical, three-dimensional world we all live in. This is the Skeptic Metaphysician. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Skeptic Metaphysician. With me back again is Karen Ensley. Karen, thanks so much for coming on the show again today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Is that right? No, for keep inviting. Thank you for having me back.
It's right today. So Karen, I'm excited to have you and our guest on the show today because it's a subject that I have been not only interested in, but know I've got to get a lot better at, but just haven't gotten up off my butt and gotten it done. So hopefully having our guest on the show today will get me motivated to do so. What do you know about breath work?
Well, it depends on the context.
Right. I don't
you need some mince breath work or like yoga breathing.
Right. Yes, all of the above. All of the above. So breath work is usually kind of tied in with yoga and things like that, but there's so much breadth to this breath work thing that having someone that knows exactly how to do it and what it's all about is going to be super beneficial. So let me introduce our next guest. He was born in Seattle. I'm not going to say the year, even though he gave it to me, because I don't want to feel really young or old, as the case was probably going to be. He has his MS in optical engineering. He left the corporate world in 2015 and committed to a spiritual path. Now, he tried just about everything, and he determined that the most efficient way to purge unnecessary information from the body is through breath work.
I like that.
Right? That kind of perks up your attention, doesn't it?
It totally does. I'm like, oh, that can't be that hard.
Well,
maybe it is.
I don't know about that.
But at least it's like I don't need equipment. Do I need equipment? Maybe I do.
It's certainly beneficial at the very least, even though it may not be so easy to do. Right. Now, he does claim that the medicine, that he calls it a medicine, has had a profound impact on his life. And he does love to share it with others who are ready to embrace what he considers the warrior spirit.
Well, I like that. I mean, that makes so much sense because when you breathe and can regulate and control your breathing, it can help you feel better. It can help you relax if you're in a nervous situation. So it just makes sense.
Yeah, Michael, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on and sitting through this incredibly long introduction.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's just set the table. Can you inform Karen just what breathwork actually is?
Well, to be fair, there's many types of breathwork and they all have different functions. And so typically you'll look at what most people are familiar with, different kinds of yoga breathing that are either for calming the mind for a meditative purpose. And that's where you go below your normal pace, or they have breath of fire, which is like a really activating Kundalini style of breath work. And then somewhere kind of in the middle of the pace and intensity is what I do, which we call just warrior breathing, only because we're careful not to step on any indigenous toes with this. You know, this style does come from Hawaiian shamanism, but I'm not Hawaiian, and it's important for me to acknowledge that because I want to be careful not to, like I said, step on toes. But
Sure,
this breath work, the purpose of it and what it does for you is it is an elevated pace, slightly full breaths in and out, and it allows your system to open up in ways that you're typically unaccustomed to. And by doing so, it kind of like sheds light on various blind spots in your mind. And of course, this is very valuable because you might not realize how things that have happened to you in your life are informing the way that you are interacting with people, the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you see your future evolving, all these things that, you could have taken on things. And this is what I say about information from your system. If you got a message when you were a child that you're not good enough or you're not worthy, then even though as a grown-up, you could say, I feel pretty good about myself, that little sliver of an idea, that bit of information could be stuck deep in your subconscious that is informing you to self-sabotage. And so it would be very difficult to identify these slivers without the assistance of, typically people will go to therapy or they use plant medicines. But like as you pointed out in the introduction, I've done a lot of different things and I feel like breathwork is by far the most effective.
So I've got to ask though, it sounds wonderful, but how can just breathing in a certain rhythm or a certain frequency bring about all these messages, get you in touch with some of the past messaging that maybe not are so beneficial to you. Like how does breathing actually connect you with all that stuff?
That's a good question. And I think that the jury is out depending on who you talk to. From a physiological point of view, this breathing technique releases endogenous DMT. So one of the things
The
that,
elusive DMT molecule.
yeah, so with like things like ayahuasca, which is the principal alkaloid
Mhm.
is DMT, or magic mushrooms, the principal alkaloid is psilocybin, which is just a more complex DMT molecule. These things are neurotransmitters that allow your mind to open up and to see higher perspective, new dimensions, all these things. Well, it wouldn't be meaningful to add DMT to your body unless you had DMT receptors already there, right?
Mhm.
Because if you added a chemical that you couldn't receive, it wouldn't do anything. So your body not only receives DMT, but it produces it. And if you can stimulate the DMT through breathing, then you get all the benefits of these psychoactive chemicals without having to take the risk of doing anything illegal or contaminated or out of control. For example, a lot of these entheogenic medicines, you know, you consume it and you're on that ride for 6 hours regardless.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Then and there's some risk there. And as a facilitator, we've never had someone actually say, "Hey, this is too much. I need to come out." But if that were the case, I could do it. Whereas with any other, chemicals, you add something to their system, they just have to ride it out no matter
You have
what.
to wait.
They're kind of stuck. You kind of throw yourself off a cliff with that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've talked to people before about DMT, but for someone who's not heard any of those interviews or doesn't know, can you explain to them what that chemical is and what that does, how that helps you?
Dimethyltryptamine, it's a neurotransmitter synthetic. Well, it's not synthetic. It's synonymous with the serotonin, and that's also not well understood. Unfortunately, there was a lot of research done in the early 90s, and that's where the famous book, The Spirit Molecule, came out.
Hmm.
And then his work, I think it was received, it was very well respected clinical work, but then all the research went away. And so our understanding of the actual role of DMT in the body is not great. And I
Hmm.
think that there is a call now through an organization called MAPS that they're trying to bring back a lot of this research, because it's very important to people, to be able to
Hmm.
explore their own consciousness. Now, I here's the thing though. As interesting as all that is, I don't need to know how my car works in order to get to the grocery store.
Right.
And so even though I would love to really understand all that chemistry and biology, you know, it's super interesting as a scientist, but it's so effective, and it's highly predictable that
Right.
it almost, I'd like to know, but I don't need to know.
Right.
Sure.
And I guess I might have been too specific. I kind of was like, why is it good? Like, why are you trying to use the breath to stimulate that? Does it just help you see things better or understand? I guess maybe that's more of what I was asking. Not
Oh,
necessarily how it's a chemical process, but why do we want this?
okay. Well, one other thing is that the argument of just stimulating DMT is there, and a lot of people who in our society, we don't typically breathe properly. A lot of people, if they have accumulated stress or
Heard that.
tension, then they start to have really shallow breathing. They don't use their full lung capacity, and so
Hmm.
generally, all the tissues in their body are oxygen low. And so, if you have a problem with any of your organs, then just by bringing more oxygen into your body, increasing blood flow, these have tons of healthy benefits. So it's not really about the DMT, which is a more visual consciousness
Hmm.
shifting chemical, as opposed to just being able to heal various things that are going on in your body. Now, I think to answer that question in a more holistic way, it the breathing in many layers and dimensions that are beyond me effectively and repeatedly allows people to see things that they've been hiding from themselves. And that's really the crux of it, is that, if jumping jacks did it, then I'd be out there proclaiming jumping jacks. It really doesn't matter.
Right.
It just happens to be that breath work, the way that we do it, shows profound results. And so
Right.
that's what we do.
So, just so that I can understand, now, DMT, I do know a little bit about DMT because I've looked into it. And DMT really is known as a hallucinogenic type of, I mean, it can be manufactured, right, artificially. So it would be a drug at that point. The jury's still out whether or not it actually occurs naturally in or exists naturally in our brains. But a lot of people say that it does. No one knows for sure, but a lot of experts believe that the pineal gland produces it and releases it when we dream, for example. Some people talk about DMT being the cause or might be responsible for those near-death experiences that you hear about, things like that. So I just want to understand, you're saying that breathing, that breath work that you do helps to stimulate DMT to emerge in your mind, and you have the same types of experiences as someone that takes ayahuasca, for example, just by doing these breathing exercises. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my assumption. We're
Mhm.
not actually testing blood in any way, but
Sure.
I make that assumption simply because having extensive experience with entheogens myself, as well as breathwork tends to attract people that are on the conscious exploration path.
Mhm.
The reports, that was, I felt like I was on acid. I felt like I was on ayahuasca. I felt like I
Wow.
had just taken mushrooms
With breath work.
with breathwork.
That's fantastic. Sign me up right now.
Yeah. Well, that's the
Because
thing.
I don't want to take a drug. I want
Yeah,
to
no.
experience all that stuff, but I don't want to take a drug. So if breath work is the way to do it, then I'm in.
Well, that's
That sounds
exactly it. And like
Mhm.
my mother, for example, she's not a drug person by any means. Very conservative in that regard. And yet it's such a powerful medicine that, and it's accessible to her. There's no legal issues. And I think that there's a lot
right.
of people like that. When we were facilitating in New Zealand, my partner and I lived in New Zealand for a short period. We had guys coming in that were accountants. They're like, oh, well, we don't do drugs, but we'll try this just because. And it gets them into states of consciousness that would be completely inaccessible otherwise, because the safety of knowing that there's nothing illegal happening here, no one is being tricked, no one is being poisoned, you
Yeah,
know
you're not putting something weird into your body.
exactly. And that's always the
That's
thing
cool.
that devalues plant medicines or any other kind of drug,
Mhm.
is that people say, oh, well, that wasn't real because I was on drugs. And it's like,
Mhm.
maybe, maybe not, but
Right.
when it's you under your own power, nothing is added. There's just so
Mhm.
much more meat to that when you have to digest whatever it is that you learned about yourself.
Mm.
That whatever it is that you're digesting was already there. No one put anything in.
So we had someone on the show before that did. You'll remember the Sadhu Da, Karen,
Mhm.
who did talk to us about breathing a certain way to find enlightenment and things like that.
Mhm.
And I assume it's kind of in the same general vein. But I didn't ask him this question, and I kicked myself the whole night afterwards. So I'm going to ask you this. The way that he was teaching us how to do it was really fast, kind of like, right? To the point where someone might say you're hyperventilating,
Mhm.
right? So could it just be your brain having a lack of oxygen or perhaps too much or something that could trigger these types of hallucinations, for example? Or do you feel that there's a lot more going on beyond that?
Well, so that's a different style of breath work that I wouldn't. I'm like a well, no, no. I mean, but I wouldn't. I don't facilitate that style.
Okay.
So that is the yogic breath of fire kind of like,
Mhm.
It is.
you
Yep.
know, and
Yeah.
it has its own purpose. But the criticism that you mentioned that I agree with is that you can just be hyperventilating. This very
Mhm.
very short breath, you're not actually circulating oxygen. It just does different things, and people do get high from it. Is that
Mhm.
high valuable? Maybe. I don't know. I've done it a couple times. I didn't particularly enjoy it. The difference between that and what we do is that the breathing, even though it's slightly above, so it'd be more like, I'm going to breathe into the mic. What's
It's
that?
like those phone calls.
The
I
ASMR.
recognize that breath anywhere.
So that's $5.99 per minute. But when you do
So
it that way, it's not that you're just really just, it's not like a sprint. It's more of a marathon. And so I think Breath of Fire they do for a few minutes. This we do 90
Mhm.
minutes. And
Oh, wow.
it's meant to kind of entrain your conscious mind into a different rhythm, because maybe this is opening up a bit of a can of worms right now, but the main reason why people get so stuck in their ideologies is because of these ruts in your mind. And it doesn't take a lot to just give a nudge out of that rut. And then once you're out, you can see that rut. Like, oh, that's why I've been doing that this last 30 years. And then now that you see it, you're invited to either go back in or change direction. And
all
that's the
right.
profound part about it, is to be able to see where you've been stuck.
Right. And there's the rub. Because someone like me who can't sit still for 12 seconds,
Hmm.
to have to sit still for 90 minutes just breathing, how does someone break into it? Like, do you go into it slowly, or do you just say, buckle in, you're in here for an hour and a half, buddy?
Yeah. And I always make the joke, no refunds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But this is actually much more accessible to someone like you than like a meditation retreat where you are required to just sit still in the quiet for hours at a time, which has
Or
its own
days, right?
benefits, of course. But no, this is highly activating, highly stimulating. We play music, we're moving around, and I
Ah,
play
Oh,
I have my didgeridoos in the back, and we're doing a lot of things. There's no boredom by any means at all. I mean, even if you were
oh,
just to sit in the room and not participate, it would still be fun for you.
wow. Okay. Well, I know Karen has had really difficult time meditating, sitting
Mm,
still and clearing her mind enough to meditate for 10 minutes. So that seems like a lot more interesting to me. Like,
mhm.
you're actively doing something as opposed to just sitting there and breathing for 90 minutes, which, I mean, obviously we do it anyway, but
Right.
we're doing other things at the same time, right?
Yeah, the difference is that, and I guess this would be the big value of actually trying it. We call it warrior breath because most people can't handle the intensity. It's not a matter of getting bored or checking out. It's that it's too much and people have to back off.
What do you mean by too much? Like, what happens? Why is it too much?
It's well, for example, let's say you experienced abuse when you were a child, and that has caused you to have unhealthy relationships with women in your adult life. And you know that you have this way that you see women and it's not healthy, but you can't figure out why. Well, I would say that that blind spot is a result of not having the courage or the willpower or basically the fundamental tools to look at how painful that experience was, because that experience when you were a child could have been so excruciating that your mind just quarantined, just blocked it off completely. Now, that resolution, which is required to have healthy relationships moving forward, demands that you, instead of that you have to take that thing out of a blind spot and say, what was that? How do I deal with this pain, this wound? Who do I have to forgive? How do I, all these things. So the intensity, it's not from breathing necessarily. It's that the breathing causes these wounds to come to the surface. And some people are like, oh shit, that wound is too deep, and then they pull out.
Right.
mm,
Whereas other
okay.
people, and this is why I have so much respect for people that do this work with me, is that these deep wounds come up, and then they just stand their ground. And I have so much respect for people that can do that, because it's not like talk therapy where you can always like try to weasel your way out of a conversation, or ayahuasca where you're just like at the mercy of the situation. Every breath you take is you taking a stand for your own well-being, because you can give up at any time. I can't force you to breathe. Anybody can give up at any time. But as long as you keep saying, no, my well being and health is worth this, I'm going to face whatever is there. And, it just takes a lot of courage.
So I assume there's a lot of emotionally charged,
Hmm.
like, people. I'm assuming you've seen a lot of emotions, whether there's anger or sorrow or deep pain. It all gets expressed during the time that they're breathing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's very intense. We see crying, wailing. The body is unbelievable in the sense that the way that these emotional binds store in the body, which I couldn't say how I know how they store, but how they release is so exotic. It's unbelievable. Like, people's bodies will contort in certain ways, or they'll sweat, or they'll get cold, or they'll sneeze, or they'll shiver, or all
You,
various.
you're bringing up a lot of things that came up during our Kundalini activation
Mm,
process, right? A lot of the same things. I'm wondering if some of this breath work actually is what maybe activating that Kundalini
mhm.
and making the same types of things happen with you in terms of the body contortions and things like that.
Yeah. So my understanding of that with relation to Kundalini is that these these binds in the body just kind of hold you still, and then as they come out, the body just kind of has to relax in whatever way that it does. And so the Kundalini energy is, it's like, imagine you have an old garden hose that's all twisted and kinked, and then you
I
turn the
do.
water way up. Then it's going to force that garden hose to go straight, right? But before it goes straight, it's going to flop around all crazy. And so that same thing happened with I mean, we don't we don't say Kundalini only, again, because someone, oh, where did you get your certification? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like,
Sure.
we're not part of that. I don't have a plaque, so we just don't
But
use
we can
that.
make you one.
Yeah. So we just don't use that terminology only for that reason. But, in that way of speaking, it is the Kundalini energy. It's that spiritual energy that's allowing the pressure on these things that are stuck to move.
Right.
So when you're doing this for an hour and a half, is it, and I guess for someone who's new to it, is it physically hard? Like, because it seems like it would be very tiring, or is it energizing? Like that's,
It's a good question. So what's interesting is that the first maybe 5 to 10 minutes, people find themselves mostly psychologically challenged in that sense, because the shift from their normal state of consciousness to this shamanic state, it can be kind of disorienting, and there's fear involved, and there's certain resistance, self-sabotage, all these things, and there's a lot of negative self-talk. So a lot of the introduction prior to starting is warning people that that's going to happen. Yes, you're going to talk yourself out of it. Don't listen to that voice. You're here, we're here to help. This is going to be great. Just keep breathing, stay focused, keep breathing, let it go. And there's a lot of that. And the interesting thing that happens is that roughly 5 to 10 minutes in, the internal momentum of the body just completely takes over. And so most people, even though someone could be thrashing around on their left and wailing, crying on their right, they'll be completely unaware of any of that because they're so internally focused. And it's not something that they have to do. They don't have to ignore anyone. It's just that if you do this breath work as we guide it, this engine just turns on. And then most people, like, they completely lose track of time. 90 minutes goes by and we go, okay, it's time to go back to normal breathing, blah, blah, blah. And, oh, wait, how long were we in it? Because in that space, time is kind of wonky anyway. So it's not difficult to keep it going. It's just that initial step into that space. That's usually,
once you get over the hump, you're good.
yeah. Well, but then you get over that hump into that space, and then things come up, and then it's a challenge, but in a completely different way.
Yeah, like an emotional challenge.
But because you have this heightened sense of awareness, your ability to process emotional wounds also goes up, and so that's what makes it meaningful. If someone were just to point out to you that you were traumatized as a kid, it's not very helpful. But but to have that reality brought up, and then also to give you maybe a sense of expanded heart consciousness, or whatever, just more empathy or towards yourself or the perpetrator, then that allows for easier processing.
Oh my gosh, I totally want to try this.
No, we're 100% going to try it. Yeah, we're doing this. So, it sounds a lot like it would be very beneficial for
everybody.
Well, yes, but specifically mental health professionals. So, is this something that mental health professionals would chance incorporate into their practices, or is this kind of like a taboo thing that maybe isn't endorsed by that type of person?
Well, I think that it's very new to a lot of mental health professionals. And like I mentioned, MAPS, it's a multidisciplinary something, but with psychedelics, that's their big thing. And there's just something about Western culture that people just much prefer to take a pill than to do anything. And so maybe from the clinical point of view, dosing somebody with a pill or an injection or whatever, people just like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hate that. But
I think it's probably because it doesn't take 90 minutes.
Well, not necessarily,
It's gone.
like
I kid, of course. I'm teasing.
Yeah.
Right? It's certainly putting in your own work. I mean, the benefits are exponentially greater than taking some sort of narcotic or an injection for something.
Right.
People don't want to do the work.
The journey on like ketamine is an hour plus, and like MDMA is, I don't know, maybe a couple hours. But the introduction to that space is very, very fast. It's very easy. And yeah, you're right. Maybe that's why it's accessible. But like I said, I think earlier, there's something about, getting awareness on these blind spots. But there's also something about saying, I'm in charge of my life. I get to say how my life is going to go. I get to choose to be happy. And you don't really have to go through that with the other things. With breathwork, you do, because every time you're challenged, every single breath, it's an opportunity to either stay the course or to give up on yourself. And so just that even if you don't have any other mystical experiences, just that practice of being there for yourself, that's extremely valuable. But there's a guy, his name is Stan Groff. He's a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, I think. I don't know. He started doing therapy with LSD in the 60s. And then when it became illegal, he founded what's called holotropic breath work, which is very similar to what we do. And he was doing that. As far as I know, he might even still be doing it. The guy's probably like in his 90s now. And he pioneered bringing breathwork into psychotherapy. So it's been around. I think that there are just other, opinions about the clinical nature of it or the accessibility of it.
It's big pharma.
Yeah, well, all
They
right.
can't charge you for it, so they're not going to promote it.
Well, yeah, people
It's
ask me all
free,
the time, oh, because of course we charge for our events.
but you're not, nobody has to buy breath.
Right. And people say, oh, can I do this on my own? Yes, please. Please do this on your own. It's like you don't only go to the dentist twice a year and have them clean your teeth. Please brush your teeth every day. Like, please.
Please.
Right.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point. Then I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have these events, and I'm going to ask you about those in a second.
Mhm.
But let's say I go and I experience one of these with you. Then I come home and I put what I've learned at your event into practice. Is this something that should be done on a daily basis? Is there the transformational piece? Is that what I expect? I go to your event and suddenly I become a new person, or does it take time to develop this type of, I don't know, spiritual growth or enlightenment?
Is it a building up effect? Or is it like a one shot? Is that what you're asking? Is it
I
like
guess.
one shot and I'm fixed, or do I have to continue to work on this?
That's a good question. In a sense, it's both, and I'll explain why. So we experience different kinds of wounding. Sometimes it's like if you're in a car accident, for example, that is a single acute wound that could threaten your sense of safety. Another kind of wound is like if your mom always told you that you're fat, like throughout your childhood. I don't know.
How'd you know that?
But then there's like these kind of slowly accumulating more insidious wounds that just take a longer time to unwind. Now, with the acute trauma style of wound, you might be able to go into a session and just be like, oh my God, I can't believe that I see that now. And then that wound in its entirety can be extracted from your system. And then there's really nothing else to do.
Wow.
But
Hmm.
with these slowly accumulating wounds, if you're a minority and you're feeling prejudice against you, you might have that experience on a daily basis for your whole life, and it could take a lot of time to unravel it. And so in that scenario, what's more likely is that you see that you've absorbing these ideas about yourself that aren't true, and then it's an ongoing practice of remembering that these ideas are not true. And that can be difficult, and that can be a lifelong practice of disregarding other people's opinions about you. So
Right.
so it could be both.
These events that you put on. So I guess I need to ask, is it better to do this in a group setting or one-to-one basis?
It's very personal. From a financial point of view, it's a lot more cost effective for people to just do it in a group. And I personally think that group participation is better simply because, and speaking as from the perspective of a man, it's more difficult for me to express myself emotionally than my partner, who is a woman. Now, for me to be in a group and to have some pain come up, like maybe something with my dad and anger, and then I hear another man in the room cry, that would maybe make it easier for me to cry. He's kind of, in a sense, giving me permission. And there is that cascading effect in groups where someone cracks, and then that allows other people to kind of ride that wave of expression. Now, that being said, some people are so shy with their emotions that they will absolutely not express anything unless they're just me and you one-on-one, and that's worth it to them.
Right. And that's where I was headed. I guess some folk might feel actually less inclined to share, to allow themselves to let go if there's other people around, than if they're on their own. Now, are these always in person, or can you do some of these things remotely?
I want to back up just a second real quick. In the groups, we play music loudly, and we also require everyone to wear an eye cover. And so, even though you're in a group, you're very aware of that other people are around when you start. We do encourage people to stay in their process for the most part. So it's not like, and everyone's laying on their backs. So it's not like you're interacting. We don't allow people to like touch each other. So we
Gotcha.
space them out.
And with the eye cover, you don't feel like everyone's watching you.
Yeah.
It helps kind of make it easier.
Yeah. And we tell people, like, this is not a voyeuristic experience. If someone's having a problem, or it sounds like they're having a problem, that's our business as facilitators to take care of. You stay with your process. And the main reason is that people will trick themselves to say, oh, out of my own compassion and love, I need to spy on this person. It's like, no. Don't avoid what's going on with you. Pay attention to your own stuff. We got this. That's why we're here. So
it does sound an awful lot like the Kundalini activation process that we experienced, Karen, in that retreat a while back. It's the same thing. We laid on our backs, had our eyes closed. There's very loud music playing. It was a very personal experience, but we didn't do any kind of breathing. I can imagine that adding the element of breath work into it would probably have made it exponentially more powerful.
Yeah.
So then back to the question on whether do we have to go to Hawaii to do this, or can we do this from the comforts of our own home?
Another popular guy who does this is Wim Hof. And he has, if you go on YouTube, he has a breathwork style that's similar to what we do, but it's good enough to start with, I think. And I guess the main difference is that the way that we facilitate isn't just coaching the breath work itself. We both do, and I hate to use this term, but like what most people consider like Reiki, body work-ish kind of things. Plus I play the didge on people and around them. And we have various other shamanic instruments, some behind me on this table that help. And so there is that added benefit. Now, that all being said, when COVID first started, we moved completely online, and we had people reporting profound experiences, like just as good as when we were doing them live. And so we did that for a while. But to be honest, it's not as much fun for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if someone really wanted to experience this with facilitators that knew what they were doing, like you and your partner, this entails flying to Hawaii. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we are open to doing remote sessions. If somebody were to contact us and say, hey, we'd love to do a remote session, I mean, we don't turn anyone down for any reason. Even if somebody said, I have a really hard time with something and I can't pay you, I don't care. It's not about the money.
Wow. So we've talked a lot about the very intrinsic and physical benefits to the mind and the body. What kind of spiritual, now obviously clearing some of the mental hurdles that you have will help you spiritually, but anything that has come across to you, have people spontaneously astral projected, for example, or did they experience past lives, or did they suddenly become one with everything, or anything like that breath work could potentially lead to?
All of it. Yeah.
Great.
Everything.
I'm in.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, going back to the DMT kind of perception of what's happening, anything that can be experienced with psychedelics is fully accessible with breath work. I mean, I'd even argue that just even meditation, all of it's accessible, but specifically with breath work, the oneness of everything, astral projecting, moving forward and backward in time, experiencing multiple phases of time simultaneously, like all that stuff. Now, while that's all awesome, and I completely agree, and I love to do it, we actually discourage it in the group because as I think you already mentioned, when you have less of a psychological burden on your system, all those other things start to just evolve and present themselves in a natural, more organic way anyway.
Absolutely.
So would you rather like take a rocket off to the moon, or would you rather just slowly become lighter and lighter that you can just float to the moon whenever you want?
Right.
And so that's the way we kind of go about it when someone comes to us like, oh, I want to trip my, and they're like, okay, well, you'll learn when you come in. So, we're not going to say no to you, but that's never the point. The point is to alleviate these burdens. And that process has so many more benefits than just, getting your kicks.
Sure. Yeah.
So talking about some of the other benefits, Will, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this back to the earth.
Man,
I know.
Always bringing me down.
Hey, no, you touched on how it can help you physically. So, but like how much of an impact, if someone has, chronic back pain, can this help with that? I mean, can it show results in that regard as well?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think it comes down to your understanding of why people have chronic problems. And so from our perspective, The reason why people have chronic problems is because there is what I would call like a sliver in your system that's keeping the wound from closing. So your body is unbelievably resilient. And if you get a cut, it will heal in a few days. And if your immune system is strong, there's no infection, it just heals very quickly. But if you get a cut and you put something in there, like a little rock or something, it's going to take forever to heal, if it ever does, and it's probably going to get infected. And so my perception of chronic problems is basically that a wound occurred and there's something keeping it open. So I wouldn't say like if you've had a chronic back pain that after one session it will completely go away. It might, that would be great, and it does happen sometimes. But what's more likely is that whatever is keeping that wound open will be removed, and then now the body's natural course of healing will occur.
Got it.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is absolutely fascinating. I had a little bit of an idea what we'd be talking about, but never in a million years did I expect it to go down this incredible rabbit hole that we went down to. And we're sadly woefully short on time, but if there's anything that you wanted to make sure, there's one thing that you would want to make sure our audience gets, what would that final comment from you be?
Oh man, the universe loves you. I mean, everything is actually working out for your favor. It's a matter of seeing it that way. There's so much available to you. Let me change it. All the beings that you cannot see are standing behind you, pushing you forward. And the more you trust in that, the happier you're going to be and the easier things will get for you.
That's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah, amazing. Michael, if someone wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Through the website. It's www.warriorbreath.life. Yeah, that's the best, the website.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put in that direct link on our show notes. So if you are interested in reaching out to Michael or his partner, or are interested in experiencing the events that they put on, you could certainly go to skepticmetaphysician.com and click the direct link. That'll take you directly to their website. I'll also add some social media links in there in case you wanted to reach out to us as well. Michael, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. You've opened up our eyes to something that we didn't have any idea was quite as in-depth as it really is. So thank you.
No, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
And Karen, thanks for sharing this journey of discovery with me.
No, thank you for letting me be here. I learned so much. I'm so excited about this.
Yeah, I can't wait to do this breathwork with you. We're going to we're going to Hawaii.
Welcome.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you.
Is there an age limit to all this? I should have asked that. How young can you be and how old can you be?
As young as people want. I mean, as long as they can follow instructions. And the age, there's no limit there. We've had people coming in at 80. And for people at a advanced age, the experience of calm when you're close to death is a critical life skill.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. Thanks again for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. I look forward to seeing you when we're 80 out there in Hawaii.
Hopefully before that.
Hopefully before that.
And thank you, listener, for coming along on this journey of discovery with us. We'd love to continue our conversation with you on Facebook and Instagram, so please feel free to find us there under @Skeptic Metaphysician, or, of course, at skepticmetaphysician.com. As always, if you know someone that would benefit from hearing the messages we've shared on this show or any of our others, I hope you'll consider sharing us with that person. It will help grow the show and may just help someone else come to terms with the fact that we are so much more than just this three-dimensional body that we inhabit. Now, if you missed any of our show today, don't worry. All of our shows, including this one, can be found on our site, skepticmetaphysician.com, where you can also become a member of the community there for free and enjoy added benefits of discounts from services from some of our past guests, as well as a chance to never miss a show immediately once it's been published. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have. Sadly, that is all we have for you today. We do want to thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Skeptic Metaphysician. Until then, take care.